up, guys? So, my name's CJ, and this is my YouTube channel, The Teachings of Tomorrow, where I go over new or misunderstood topics, and I just try to break them down for you guys and help you guys understand things better. And today's topic is something that I really hold close, and this is something that's never taught in schools, which is why I thought it was so important, and this is the concept of how to learn. So with how to learn, we're going to break it down into three parts: the issues when it comes to learning, the parts of the brain and how they work, and finally, three of my favorite techniques when it comes to learning. So, now, let's get started by going off with the issues. Now, one of the biggest issues when it comes to learning is procrastinating. And I would know because I'm one of the worst procrastinators, or I used to be at least. Back in school, I would never study anything. I just waited until the last minute. Now, if we're going to get specific about definitions, the term procrastinate means to put off doing something. And how this works is that we have something we need to study or do, like a project or a test. And when it comes to learning anything new, especially if you procrastinate, your brain sends a signal that makes you feel an actual pain. And the two ways to ease this pain is either to study, and after a few minutes it goes away, or you can relax and not do anything, which also gets rid of the pain. But the problem with procrastination is that this causes another bad learning technique called cramming, where you just stay up all night and study, which is okay if you're just trying to regurgitate information, just say it back, but your brain won't be able to hold on to about 75% of that information after even just 2 days. And it's a very vicious cycle because you're afraid of actually trying and looking bad that you barely even try to begin with. And this can be a huge problem because if you constantly are cramming, then you don't get the benefit of learning something new. You're just training your brain to be a parrot pretty much, to say the exact same thing back and forth, back and forth. And that was when I started looking for a learning technique that can just ease the burden of fearing failure so that we can understand it rather than get discouraged by it. And that's when I saw this video from Mark Rober. He's doing a talk in which he explained a way to change your thoughts. It's called the Super Mario effect. Now the simple version is, in games you play, you fall in a pit or get smacked by something and it kills you, and when you lose in games though, you keep the controller and you keep playing the game because to you it doesn't really matter if you mess up. And he goes on to say that this mentality, this way of thinking that we have for games, it needs to be applied to daily life. So that when we fail at anything, instead of being embarrassed or put down, we just turn our focus to what we can fix, to become better. This is fundamentally important to embrace the lessons learned from mistakes. Don't be afraid to make them, because you aren't going to learn anything by being perfect. Also, in my personal opinion, perfect people are kind of boring. Now let's move on to the next part, which is how the brain actually works. So, according to Dr. Barbara Oakley, our brain, when it comes to learning, has two modes: the focus mode and the diffuse mode. Now, we're going to start by talking about the focus mode. This is the one that all your teachers talk about. They're just like, oh, make sure you focus, 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 focus. This is the most important thing when it comes to learning. And it is pretty important when it comes to learning, but it's not the most important. But we'll start talking about that. So, the focus mode. It works best for when you already kind of know the subject a little bit. And when you already know the subject a little bit, the best thing you can do is turn off any distractions. Turn off your phone, your TV, your computer, all those other things. And you just literally put your head in a book and you go to town. And then the focus mode works. Now, let's say you get stuck and you don't know where to go. This is when you need to relax, sit back, and start letting the diffuse mode of your brain go to work. Now, this mode works, you're using this mode when you're listening to music or you're going for a walk or you're sleeping. This is when that diffuse side of your brain starts to work. And this is where it actually mixes a lot of the ideas that you put into your brain together to actually kind of form new thoughts. This is a creative thinking part of your brain. It creates new ideas. And this is really important. So let's think of learning something new like making a smoothie. So all this information that you're taking in, let's say that's like fruit. And the focus mode of your brain is very important. That's the blender. Now, the diffuse mode is equally as important because the diffuse mode you can think of as the buttons for the blender. Because you can't mix the smoothie together unless you blend it together. So you need the buttons and the blender to make it actually mix together. Otherwise, you're not going to have a fully formed smoothie. You're not going to have a fully formed idea. So if you do all those things together and you mix the focus and the diffuse mode back and forth, you're going to have an awesome smoothie of knowledge stuff. And great scientists and inventors have actually used this method, like Einstein and Edison. Like, one story with Edison is that what he would do is that he would spend all of his time coming up with these inventions, and he'd keep making mistakes over and over and over. He'd be like, oh, I don't know what to do. So he would sit back, relax in a chair. He'd grab two ball bearings, like these metal balls, put them in his hand, and he'd start kind of like dozing off, slowly going to sleep, and then at some point the balls would fall out of his hand, smack on the ground, and wake him up. He'd be like, oh, what's happening? And he'd go right back to work, and he would actually be able to think of new ways of thinking because he had time to use that diffuse mode in his brain. And Einstein did the same thing. He would spend days on end in his room just studying concepts, studying papers of other scientists, going over concepts of space-time and other very difficult concepts to understand. And then what he would do is when he would get stuck, he would go for walks. And on these walks, he would develop what he would call his thought experiments, which actually really helped him explain most of his amazing ideas that he had in mind. So always keep in mind that you need to use both parts of your brain in order to make really great thoughts and new ideas and have fully formed concepts when it comes to learning. It's so important. Finally, we're going to move on to the third part, which is my favorite 3 techniques. Wow, I just realized that I used the word concept like a lot. But regardless, we're going to go into my final part, which is my 3 favorite techniques when it comes to learning. The first is the one that we kind of talked about with Edison and Einstein already, and that one is called the Pomodoro technique, which is essentially what you do is you just set a timer for 25 minutes, pretty short amount of time, and then in that 25 minutes, you get rid of any distractions and you just solely focus. Use that focus mode of your brain, 25 minutes without any distractions, and you just stay focused for that entire time. And then after that 25 minutes, then you just take a break for a few minutes, relax, play video games, watch YouTube for a few minutes, and then you go right back into it for another 25 minutes and back, and you keep repeating it. And this is really good for if you actually are studying something that you are really nervous about, that you're unsure that you can actually accomplish, because then it's kind of just picking at what you need to learn slowly but surely, and you'll learn it over time. The Pomodoro effect is very effective. The next one is called the Feynman technique, which is obviously named after a professor whose name was Feynman. And what he would do is that he would want to study a subject, but he would want to study it to the point of where he could actually feel comfortable teaching it to a class, which I would highly recommend if you're using this technique to actually try teaching it to people. And even more, if you want to, try to teach it to somebody teach it to them like they're a kid, They're always asking why and all these things. It's very important for the Feynman technique. And finally, my third favorite technique is one that is a great substitute for cramming. And this technique is called the sleep sandwich technique, or method. One of those things. But how it works is that instead of studying the entire night, just being exhausted going into school the next day for your test or project or whatever, you spend a solid block of a few hours studying. And then you sleep. And then you study for another few hours when you wake up in the morning because your brain's in a really good state to pick up info. And during that sleeping time, you got to use that diffuse side of your brain, so you actually got to mix the ideas together. So it's actually the best of both worlds, and it helps you keep even more information than if you spent the entire night cramming. So make sure you get your sleep. Also, make sure you drink water, because that's also really good for your brain. So if you use all of these techniques, or any of these techniques, and you also remember water, sleep, super important. If you use all of those things together, then you will start to actually feel smarter because you'll be learning things quicker and you'll be like, oh my goodness, I didn't know I could actually learn this stuff. And as you do that, you'll realize that anybody can be smart. Anybody can be intelligent. It's not just a thing that only a few people are capable of. Even you who are sitting there right now watching this video, you can be super smart. All you gotta do is just work at it day in, day out. and just not stop trying. Because trying is the main purpose of learning. That's how you learn, just by even trying it. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, I just want to say, please subscribe, turn on notifications, message me if you have any future videos that you want me to do, and thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end. You guys are awesome. And also, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Peace out.